To begin this Neurocircuit assay, flies are mounted to dental wax on a slide. 4 electrodes are inserted into the fly. 1 ground electrode in the abdomen, 1 recording electrode in the dorsal longitudinal flight muscles in the thorax, and 2 stimulating electrodes in the head. Electrode placement is confirmed by finding the giant fiber threshold and noting a visible response. The fly is delivered a high-frequency wave train of the desired voltage, and if no seizure occurs, the trace on the oscilloscope will be flat. If a seizure does occur, the trace will show uncontrolled activity as a response to the high-frequency stimulus.
Hi, I'm Mark Tonaway, professor in the Department of Environmental Science, Policy and Management at the University of California, Berkeley. Today we will show you a procedure for assaying electrophysiological seizures in Drosophila. We use this procedure in our laboratory to study seizures in Drosophila mutants and determine seizure thresholds for these mutants. So let's get started.
The night before the experiment, male flies of the required genotype are anesthetized with carbon dioxide and placed in a fresh food vial, capped with a soft nylon plug or cotton ball. Following carbon dioxide anesthetization, the seizure threshold is altered, so the flies are best left for at least 6 hours, though overnight is ideal. On the day of the experiment, the flies are mounted one at a time to glass slides with a layer of dental wax on one side. Flies are manipulated without anesthetization by being picked up by the head using a blunted 23-gauge needle attached to a vacuum line. They are then mounted to the slides by pushing down the legs and wings into the dental wax. Once the fly is immobilized, wax is pushed up around the neck and eyes to fully immobilize the head. The fly is now mounted and ready for electrophysiology. The electrophysiology setup consists of 3 sets of micromanipulators, each with 1 to 2 sharpened tungsten electrodes attached. The tungsten electrodes are used bare and require no saline. Voltage is provided by a stimulator that is connected to an isolation unit attached to the stimulating electrodes. The recording electrode is connected to a preamp, which in turn is attached to a digital storage oscilloscope. While it is not essential, it is useful to have a speaker hooked up to the oscilloscope so that responses can be made audible. The immobilized fly is now placed on the microscope stage, and a ground electrode is inserted into the abdomen of the fly. The recording electrode is inserted into one of the dorsal longitudinal muscles in the thorax of the fly. The sharpened electrodes are strong enough to puncture the exoskeleton if care is used. Occasionally, electrodes will bend and need to be replaced. The stimulating electrodes are inserted through the cuticle of the head, in the space between the eye and the antenna. The fly is now set up for making recordings. Next, prepare the instruments for recording. The stimulator should have the following settings at setup: a continuous pulse interval of 2 seconds between each pulse, 0 pulse delay, and a pulse width no larger than 0.2 milliseconds. The oscilloscope should have the storage feature turned on and have the following settings. Time per division should be set to 1 millisecond per division. The volts per division should be set to 100 millivolts per division. Later, if the response is not ideally strong, this setting can be changed to 50 millivolts per division. The giant fiber threshold is determined by delivering single electrical pulses of incremental voltage and noting the minimal voltage required to register a response in the recording electrode. This measurement is typically around 2 volts. Once the giant fiber threshold has been determined, stop pulsing the fly and change the settings on the oscilloscope to 0.2 seconds per division. Now change the settings on the stimulator. Set the pulse interval to a single pulse and activate the pulse train. The waveform parameters are set to 0.5 millisecond pulses at 200 Hz for 300 milliseconds. The voltage is changed to the desired setting and a high-frequency wave train of pulses is delivered to the fly's brain to induce a seizure. After the pulse train, the oscilloscope trace will show a flat component if a seizure is not induced. In this case, if the settings are quickly returned to those when recording began, the single pulses will cause a response in the giant fiber system. If a seizure is induced, the oscilloscope will show the seizure-like activity after the train. Now, if the settings are quickly switched back to the original settings, the single pulses will fail to activate a response in the giant fiber system. The flies have a refractory period after a high-frequency stimulus wave train, during which seizure-like activity cannot be induced. If no seizure occurs, the flies are refractory for approximately 7 minutes, and if a seizure is induced, the flies are refractory for approximately 17 minutes. After the refractory period, additional high-frequency stimuli can be delivered to the same fly at voltages either higher or lower than the previous train until the seizure threshold is determined, or until the giant fiber response becomes too weak to see, in which case the fly must be discarded and a new experiment started. After the experiment is completed, the fly is removed from the electrophysiology setup, released from the wax, and disposed of. In properly mounted flies with correct electrode placement, high-frequency stimulation at a chosen voltage can lead to seizure-like activity. Where no seizure occurs, the trace immediately after the stimulation is flat. Where a seizure does occur, the trace will show uncontrolled activity.
We've just shown you how to assay for seizures in Drosophila using electrophysiology. When using this assay, it is important to have the fly mounted properly so that the electrodes may be inserted easily. Improperly placed electrodes are the most difficult cause of problems for this assay. So that's it. Thanks for watching and good luck with your experiments.